Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We're now going to be reviewing some of the headlines in today's newspapers from around the world. And, Doctor, of course, we will start with This Day.
Oh, yes. Well, front page of This Day, the lead story there is something we already discussed earlier on.
Yes.
ICPC probes Northeast National Assembly members over diversion of constituency project funds. MDA's contractors should be queried, not lawmakers, says Ndume. And of course, the substance of it is the ICPC, pointing out that in terms of performance, in terms of delivery, the worst affected part of the country is the Northeast. Yeah. And the story even provides an explanation that poor execution of constituency projects as a result of the insurgency in the northeastern part of the country. Naturally, the lawmakers from that part of the country, from the 3 senatorial districts, have denied that this is the case because there is an indication by ICPC that these, lawmakers collected money and did not execute projects, or many of the projects were abandoned. Yeah. And the excuse that is given is the insurgency in the area. But, as we discussed earlier on, Senator Ali Ndume, who is the chair of the Senate Committee on the Army, speaking, I guess, on behalf of his colleagues from that area, pointed out that the ICPC should be looking in the direction of the ministries, departments, and agencies, and the contractors who were directly involved in the execution of projects and who will be responsible to give account, and that no senator or House of Reps member collects money for the execution of projects. But the whole point is, how do we monitor these constituency projects? How do we evaluate these constituency projects? And then is it true, as claimed now and previously by lawmakers, that they do not handle funds directly, that they only give suggestions in terms of what constituency projects will best suit the interest of their people?
And like we said, there's no need as well for a constituency projects commission, which was also suggested as a development in order to tackle this issue,
Yeah, that's Senator Ali Ndume's proposal. Then again, if you still look at the front page of This Day, there is this story: opposition mounts against hate speech bill as editors IPI Olanipekun kick. Sponsor lists dangers of non-passage. Now, that second leg of it we discussed earlier when we referred to the objection by Senator Sabi Ali Abdullahi to criticisms of the hate speech, the bill for the establishment of a commission to prohibit hate speech. And he said, look, people are not looking at the dangers involved, and if we do not have a law on hate speech, it's the country that will lose at the end of the day. And I think we'll discuss that at length. Yes. But here, this front page story in This Day is quoting the Nigerian Guild of Editors, the Nigerian chapter of the International Press Institute, and former president of the Nigerian Bar Association, Chief Wole Olanipekun, SAN. And they are all calling on the National Assembly to pull back from further consideration of the bill, which they described as against national interests. And of course, the same concern by the Guild of Editors, which just held its annual conference in Sokoto from November 27 to December 1. The Guild of Editors is also rejecting the bill, noting that draconian legislation has no place in Nigeria's democracy. So that the media is already distressed enough. Anything that would limit the scope of media freedom is not good for democracy, or that will limit the scope of the average citizen's freedom of expression.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that call.
Story from This Day that's of interest to you?
Absolutely. Down below, the federal government, IPIS will expose atrocities in universities. Now, this comes in interesting because just last week on the show, we had Dr. Dele Ashiru from ASU here with us, defending ASU's position as to why they don't want to go along with the IPIS system. And the federal government are here putting out a new point that it's going to expose atrocities in universities, which we have said repeatedly is the case and is why it's time to digitize the payment system. Doctor, what's your take?
Yeah, the story quotes at length the spokesperson of the Federal Ministry of Education, also Deputy Director of Press at the Federal Ministry of Education, Mr. Bembem Gung, who asked the question that, look, ASU has been talking about how IPs, the integrated payment system and personal information, would erode university autonomy, as spelled out in the University's Miscellaneous Provision Act of 2003 and the University's Autonomy Act of 2007. And that, look, ASU has not been able to make its case. It just says there will be an erosion of autonomy, but how? ASU has not been able to point that out. And he asked the question. The question is, I'm quoting him now, what does ASU have to hide? And that what government is proposing is the evolution and refinement of the payment system. And that already there is a template that has been worked out to address the peculiarities of ASU.
Exactly.
But still, ASU is still threatening to go on strike. Well, as Dr. Ashiru pointed out, he says, if there is no pay, then there will be no work.
And as we pointed out to him, there's
no
pay.
Work, no pay.
And as we pointed out to him, there's pay, just integrates into the system.
Yeah, but I hope that the matter will be resolved.
Absolutely.
If ASU is still insisting that government is not listening to them, there can be no alternative to dialogue. They should continue to, engage in further negotiations and dialogue, and not to create a system whereby the university system will be shut down, and then the persons who will be punished will be innocent students and their parents.
Absolutely. Let's move on to the Daily Trust newspaper. And the headline on the Daily Trust newspaper today is Nigeria's refineries in ruins despite MOUs with China, India and others. Now, government officials justify foreign trips through MOUs, according to an expert. Now, this headline, of course, comes as no surprise. And recently, we also know that Mele Kyari had come out to say that he wants to make sure that Nigeria's refineries are up and running by 2023. The fact of the matter is, yes, our refineries are in ruins, and it is a terrible situation to be in. Although, if we want to look at some good news to do with refineries at the same time, back on this day, at the top, Dangote Refinery receives the world's largest crude distillation equipment. So I guess that's a good counter to the bad news on Daily Trust. But it's true. There's nothing here that isn't true about what they've said. What's your take, Doctor?
Yeah, I mean, many Nigerians are pinning their hopes on, the effort by Dangote and the Dangote Refinery. And the expectation is that, if that refinery manages to produce, hundreds of thousands of refined product on a daily basis, then of course that could make a difference. But the question, posed by the story in Daily Trust remains. We need to get our refineries to work. You hear all the time about turnaround maintenance and efforts to get, experts from other parts of the world to come and assist. And yet, even the refineries that are working at below capacity, below optimum capacity. Yeah. And that has been part of the problem. Each time we have issues, either with the cost, the pump price of petrol, or with the scarcity of fuel. Well, thankfully, we haven't had the, scarcity of a product for a while. But definitely, a country like this should be able to get its refineries working so that the kind of arrangement that we have at the moment, being introduced by the NMPC, will not really be the only thing that we'll rely upon.
Absolutely. And we'll just take one other story on the Daily Trust today on
maybe
how...
perhaps there should be more private refineries to be encouraged.
That
so that
should
it's
be
not
the
only
case.
Dangote Refinery.
Exactly.
Because the inefficiency that we have seen on the part of government, maybe perhaps private investors with the right incentives can make a difference.
That's honestly the way it should be, and that's where the difference should lie. One other interesting story here, Doctor, on the Daily Trust today, how sex offenders register can curb rape and others. And we know that last week, Nigeria's first ever sex offenders register was launched. And some statistics inside show that this year alone, in terms of reported cases that are recorded from January 2019 to date, there are a total of 189 survivors and 25 states affected by rape and sexual abuse. So hopefully this new sex offenders register is definitely going to make those figures really and truly reflect Nigeria's heinous rape culture more than we have reported in our data and statistics today. So,
yes, I mean, in the light of some of the recent incidents that have been reported, rape has become a big issue in Nigeria. And I think one of the states that has opened the register is Ekiti State.
Yes.
You know, and the whole idea is to name and shame the persons who are, you know, convicted, you know, in rape matters or who have been identified as serious sex offenders. And I think that is a good development. Hopefully it can serve as some kind of deterrence so that people will know that, well, if you try it, then you'll be named and shamed. And, you know, the sex offenders register is something that, of course, that they have in other jurisdictions, either in the United Kingdom or in Canada. But the thing, of course, is that if we keep that register, you know, apart from naming and shaming, what are the implications? You know, are there certain other, you know, damage that persons whose names appear on that register will suffer? And, you know, would there be some kind of database that people can access?
I think there's a public database attached to it. And the entire idea is, okay, you can come forward with names and those who are convicted will have their names stamped on that register so that people know, and it serves as a deterrent. So, yeah. Any other papers?
Yes, well, okay. Vanguard.
We just discussed this as well.
Vanguard. We just discussed that lead story. Private sector rejects Finance Bill 2019. Petitions Buhari. Says it will kill business, worsen poverty level if signed into law. Task federal government to widen tax net, include non-paying groups and persons.
Yes.
And then if we go quickly to the Punch newspaper of Nigeria, 5 months after inauguration, senators yet to set up constituency offices. Lawmakers shun constituents. People seek assistance for social events. Now, this is the big problem in Nigerian politics. And, you know, people often protest that politicians tend to remember their constituents only during election season. After election, they get elected, they start avoiding the same people until the next election
cycle
season
comes back.
You know, and some of these, the report says many of the senators don't even have constituency offices. Maybe they don't even go home. Maybe they are just in Abuja. But there's another side to the story, you know, that there is insecurity in parts of the country, or that, you know, they are disturbed by their constituents who are perpetually begging for money.
Well.